Kevin Kwok, founder of J29 Creative Group. We're back for another episode of Digital First, and I got More Than a Meal and Mitch. So tell us a little about More Than a Meal.
The whole concept of More Than a Meal got started after we had received a really simple ingredients that some friends had chopped up for us. And at the time I was working as an engineer and probably working close to 60 plus hours a week. And I remember coming home from work one day, my wife had thrown this into a slow cooker and she just looked at me and was like, I finally felt like I helped out today. So this whole idea of More Than a Meal got started around this idea of empowering new parents through maybe the more challenging experiences that you might have through a newborn. And much to our surprise, after doing this for a couple of years and then COVID kind of coming in and slowing everything down for us, we had the opportunity to look at why are people buying from us and who's buying. And what really surprised us was that over 70% of our orders were coming from businesses buying for their employees and clients because they were just really looking for that way to increase engagement, really focus on, especially from that remote hybrid work space, being able to reach them even though they weren't in the office. So we made that switch back in April of 2020. I felt the nudge to go all in before the plane was even put together. So I quit my engineering job in September 2020 and been doing this now full time since then for a little over 2.5 years.
Wow, that's crazy. I know you and I met pre-COVID. We talked when it was just an idea, it was just a concept. And I think a lot of times that's how startups get started, is it becomes just an idea, right? It starts as an idea, and then the idea solves a problem and becomes a solution, and then it becomes a business opportunity. And I think today's episode, I really want to focus on the whole idea of, okay, you have an idea, you have a concept, but what does that look like execution-wise? And now you're 5 years in and you're doing it. I see the branding, I see the colors, and This was all an accident, but it worked out well. Okay. So what did that look like at the beginning? How did you shape and form and mold this concept into an actual brand?
I had read a couple of books and kind of gotten really into this personal development side of things. And there's somebody once told me that if you aren't absolutely embarrassed by what you put out the door day one, you waited too long to get started. And so this idea kept coming to me over and over again, especially as we were playing with this idea. And at the time it was called Mommy Meals. And as I said before, we're shopping at Hy-Vee and using their delivery vans. Things are showing up in brown paper bags. And so I look back now and see this, and that at the time I didn't realize what I was doing was what that person had told me was, if you aren't absolutely embarrassed, you've waited too long to get started. And so this whole idea of how can we get started as low cost as possible to just validate this idea. And for us, we needed to go through the steps and processes that it took. Fortunately, as an engineer, processes,
that's all you
my
do.
Jam. Yeah. So reverse engineering this idea of, hey, we can really make an impact on somebody's life with this meal at their doorstep, but how do we get there? And so we were able to throw this website up and figure out how to go from point A to point Z at virtually no cost from an investment perspective. And we operated that way for 2 years, and that's what gave us the indication that, okay, this is actually something that this target audience needs because they bought from us. Now, how can we build a business plan around that at the right cost to go out and produce something that can support our family and what we hope to be several other families as we add more team members to our team.
And I love what you said, More Than a Meal started with value and impact, because I'm all about that as a marketer, right? There's ways to market something, but if there's no value in what you're marketing, it's very hard to connect, right? You have to be able to make an impact. And I think that's more crucial than ever in the society we live in, because we live in this digital, realm, right? Where there's digital marketing, it's noisy. There's a lot of noise when you turn on the phone. You're bombarded with marketing, right? So if there's no value, there's no impact, it's almost impossible to connect. So tell us a little about how were you connecting with your customers, and what did that conversation look like when you guys first started?
With the very beginning, when we first got started, the initial feedback from recipients was confusion.
Okay.
They thought they were getting like this packaged meal kit, and it showed up in a brown paper bag with ingredients in it. It still had the price tags on from the grocery stores that we were buying stuff from, and they thought they got groceries. So that part was pretty embarrassing. The clients that we had that were buying for them, especially once we kind of had this idea of switching from B2C to B2B, there was a lot of just convincing and friends that were in positions of making decisions within organizations to know and trust that I would take care of them with their money. So there was a lot of persuasion at the beginning of having this idea of buy this so that we can get started, and we want to go and take care of your employee. It's been a lot of relationship building. I think for any organization in more of that B2B space, over and over and over again, it's going to be building those relationships. Now,
that's so good. Because I think too, from a messaging perspective, with what you're doing, it's really changing the narrative, because I think as we're more mobile device driven, the human race, we're driven by these digital devices, electronics, is sitting together as a family that is less popular. Even a lot of times you're sitting there, but you aren't there, right? Because the kids have their devices, the parents have their devices, and and nowadays, coming back, I mean, COVID's still here, but just coming back from it all, we're so busy. You got long days at work, you go home, and even for myself and my wife, we both work here at J29. It is sometimes so frustrating, just like you cook or I cook, like we're arguing like who's gonna cook. And then we end up eating out, right? And eating out is super unhealthy if you do it, 5 consecutive days, whatever, with your kids. So from starting out with just a concept to where you are now, where do you see more than a meal, regardless from a marketing perspective? What are things that you like to do moving forward in the future?
So the way that we see that is either repeating the process that we have here in Kansas City, which we utilize a small catering company to help us with our meals and make sure everything is done correctly. We could go and repeat that in other cities. So we've talked about how do we get to 20 states, 30 states, 40 states, 50 states by duplicating what we have done within More Than a Meal. Right now, what we're really focused on is making sure that we really focus in on the market that we can serve right now. And we'll keep tabs on the organizations that can't move forward with us because we can't hit all of their employees that are outside of our region. And when that day comes, we'll definitely open up some more kitchens.
That's awesome. So I think to sum things up for the audience, when you are a startup or when you have an idea, so just from my conversation with Mitch, it's so important to know your value, know the impact you're making, and then execute. You got to do it, right? And once you do it, then the A and B testing starts, right? You can't just go out there and go, hey, I think a lot of startups where they fail is they just have an idea and they just go blindly, and then there's money involved, right? I think when it comes to business, it's really being able to listen, right? Allow the customers to drive versus I think as business owners, a lot of times we want to dictate how it's driven versus allowing your audience to do that. And nowadays you have social media and all these tools to allow you to, get feedback as where your business needs to go.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Mitch.
Awesome, Kevin.
Appreciate you.
Me.
Thank you.